Welcome back to Lighten Up. I'm your host, Ronnie, and today we are excited to have a special guest, Miss Erin Brown. You may know her as Consciously Erin, your friendly neighborhood energy alchemist that brings you the Schumann Resonance Report every morning. And more than this, she is an energy channel, intuitive oracle, author, and certified coach. Alongside Tamara and I, today we'll explore how science and spirituality collide. Erin's background in the medical field provides unique insights into the energetic shifts that we're all feeling and bridges the gap between the law of attraction and proven results. Get ready. This will be a deep dive into your power as a conscious creator. So good to have you here, Erin.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Can I just fangirl Erin for a moment before Erin
Please
starts talking?
do.
I need to fangirl you just for a moment, okay? Out of all the so when I started following Schumann Resonance, it was like people would be like, there was a timeline jump, there was this, the graph went dark, da 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 da. If anybody wants to follow the Schumann Resonance, you want to understand what is happening in the electromagnetic fields, please follow Erin. We have the link in the show notes. Your precision, but here was the thing. For those of you who don't know, we do pre-podcast interviews and we chatted with Erin, and the expertise that you broke down that I had no idea about the Schumann resonance is off the charts. So Erin's not one of these fly-by-nights. You're not like tuning into other people's reports. This is I just want people to understand, this is your expertise. How long were you studying the data points on the Schumann resonance on a daily basis? Like, how long were you putting that data together?
A full year. Every single day for 365 days.
And then your background is also science based. So just unpack that for just a moment.
So I come from medicine. Right. I was a nurse for 25 years and then got my master's degree in health professions education. So I was working at a university teaching medicine in simulation, like designing high-tech simulations when my awakening happened. That environment was not super conducive to learning about this stuff. Nobody there wanted to talk about this. So one day
the health people didn't want to talk about like electromagnetic fields on the planet.
Well, to a point. So they will agree with me that your body is electrical in nature. Your heart, your brain works on electrical patterns. But when I start to say, so if that's true, isn't it logical to put forth a theory that energy coming into the earth on mass scale would affect your energetic signals? Conversations ended, books were closed. Nope, we're not talking about this. You're talking about fringe science. It was absolutely met with 100% resistance. So, I'm sitting here and then I don't even remember exactly how I came across the Schumann resonance other than a friend of mine who is a meteorologist said, hey, have you ever looked into this? Have you ever checked this out? And I was like, no. Somehow I found it at this point, I don't remember. And I started noticing that I would wake up feeling a certain way and I would check it and I would have patterns that started to repeat themselves. So then I thought, okay, well, what do you do with science when you have this? Well, you create a theory. So what I did was to create a theory, I need data. So every single day in my notebook, I actually looked for the notebook to show you and I don't know where it is, but I kept track in a
it probably got lost in one of the timeline jumps.
Right? It probably did. or my son's bedroom. That's a whole nother thing. Vortex in itself. So I kept track of all this and I started to notice very clear patterns. And after about 365 days, I went into work one day and I opened up the statistical analysis AI thing that we had there at the university. And I basically scanned my material and put it into the device and it created statistics for me. And there was a significant statistical shift based on the correlation between how I felt and what showed up in the graph. So the next step in science is to put your theory out to be peer reviewed, right? Ask other people, this is what I've discovered. What do you think? There's no place for me to do that. In academia, no one is interested in a paper I have to write about that. So I thought, what's the next best thing was TikTok. This is a global audience of people with open minds.
TikTok is kind of a peer review session.
Well, it is now. For sure it is. So, I put this out there and I just did it thinking I'm either going to get nothing or people are going to understand. And the response was overwhelming. Yeah. So I've just kept going with that. But there are certain things that correlate very specifically in my energy. And I am easily able to pull those up. the insight I get from it, like when I am in my videos and I say in meditation this, in meditation that, that's coming from a place of a channel. That's where I've already gotten what I need. I go into meditation and I just say, okay, what do I need to know? What else do I need to know? When I make these videos, I haven't necessarily ended my meditation, so I'm still in that state, and it will just start coming out a lot of the times, and I don't have a lot of control over it. It just sort of flows through, but it's been pretty steady. The stuff that's going on, there's a couple different graphs. The one I normally look at is found in Tomsk, Russia. There's another graph that's very common that's found in Italy. I always say the town name wrong, but it's Cumania, Italy. That measures a different type of frequency, a different oscillation. So I rarely look at that one, but that one in the last, I don't know if it's 2 days now, 3 days now, has got this pattern on it that I have never seen in the 2, 3, 4 years I've been watching this. It has never shown up, and it is consistent and persistent, and it is shifting and changing, matching up to a lot of information I'm getting through dream state and meditation about opening of doors and opening halls of knowledge. I think it's amazing that it happens to correspond with these discoveries in Egypt and space and all this stuff that we're doing all at once. It's just all coming to a point, is what it feels like. You know, I don't know a lot about astrology, but based on what I'm hearing about astrology, the energy we're getting, the discoveries that are being made, it feels like everything is pushing like this, right up to a point, kind of like a volcano. At some point, something has to give somewhere. You can't keep doing the push, pull. Something has to break.
Well, let's get into that because it seems like there's a lot of energy stirring up. Like, given the news, there's a lot of energy stirring up. We do have to go into our news rundown. The good news, maybe a little bit of the not so good news today.
I mean, we have funny news, right?
We have funny news.
Good news, and then let's do funny news.
Okay. So we have the good news. We have a record-setting black hole discovery from a high schooler in California that is a now dormant black hole that was discovered, but like pretty incredible.
The high schooler discovered it?
A high schooler in California, in Anaheim.
What? God, these kids are so smart. I know what I was doing in high school, and it wasn't that.
Not that. Probably
you should remind me and bring it back to this just to tie in. There's a term for that, the building of knowledge based on generational growth. So we should come back to that at some point.
Ooh, yes, let's do that. So we
what
also
a cliffhanger! Damn it! Okay, fine.
We also have the northern lights that are visible in Michigan and parts of the United States as of March 25th and 26th, which is exciting. There's a lot of like aurora borealis magnetic field things.
Erin probably knows more about that than we do.
That's why I wanted to bring it up. All of the like science and nature like good news today, because Erin knows all about those electromagnetic fields. We'll get into that. And then of course we have the solar eclipse happening on Saturday, which has already brought up so much energy for, I think, all three of us. We were just chatting about it.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's all new stuff. Like the patterns I'm seeing on these graphs, I haven't seen before. So we're in uncharted territory right now.
Uncharted territory. We still have to talk about Signal Gate.
Oh, fine. Let's talk about the funny news.
We have to talk about Signal Gate first.
Those silly boys. What kind of frat party is happening, by the way? That's like what it feels like. I feels like the United States is being run by a fraternity house. Like, there's
this is for a 12-year-old. I mean, it depends on how you look at it, right?
This is what happens when you put men in charge, I guess.
Well, I was sitting here and I was trying to picture what it might feel like to be the reporter. Your phone starts going off and you look down and you're like, what is this? And then ding, ding, ding. I can just imagine sitting here going, am I being punked? Like, what is happening right now? Like, how does it happen that the reporter managed to get onto this text chain? Like, I don't understand what.
I saw something.
Well, real quick, because my favorite was when they were like, like Pete Hegseth is trying to like diss on the reporter and he's like, he's an idiot. He doesn't da-da-da-da. And I'm like, somebody had to put him on. Who was the one that approved him? Who snuck him in? Somebody had to add him to the chat.
I saw someone say, did they mean to put in another Jeffrey? AKA like Jeffrey Bezos.
Oh, can you imagine?
It's like an epic butt dial.
Hmm.
Can you imagine if Jeff Bezos was supposed to be on there? He's like,
Yeah.
I'll Amazon ship drop something. What is going on? It's like a giant frat party.
It's
That's like the only thing I could relate it to. I'm like,
So have you seen which judge was assigned to the case?
no.
no
Okay.
who.
So I can't think of the judge's name, but it's the judge that had to do with the deportation flights. It's the same
Oh,
judge.
that judge is on it then.
That
Oh,
judge
good.
already having lots of problems with Trump and the administration's unwillingness to provide information that the judge is asking for. This is the judge that's been assigned to this case.
Oh,
So
thank good.
I can't imagine it's going to go very smoothly just based on that. It just kind of, I'm lining up here going, it's like watching a soap opera, like, oh,
Yeah.
what's going to happen next?
Like we're like, this is like the season finale of the first quarter of 2025.
Hmm.
It's like the eclipse is coming, things are the frat house is at an all-time high. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, which is, and I talk about this with my clients. I think we might have touched on this, Ronnie, on a past podcast too. But the systems and structures that we know have been predicted to collapse, meaning like we're going to enter into a higher level of consciousness, economics, political, healthcare, education. Like my guru mentioned that 10 years ago, that it would collapse. I thought it was going to be 9 years ago we were going to start that, but
Right.
it feels like maybe this year is a big collapsion. That's a
Yeah.
word. I just made it up. Collapsion
I like
of
it.
things. Is that correlative to what you're noticing on the Schumann resonance for the last, I don't know, like it seems like things are a little bit more intense, changing.
They are. So this all corresponds with our sun reaching its solar maximum, right? This is a
Okay.
cycle that our sun goes through on a periodic basis. I don't know the time span, it's 10, 12 years, something like that. We are literally in the middle of our solar maximum, but this solar maximum has been more intense than others in the past on record. So yes, physically it is corresponding, right? All of that's happening with the sun. I don't know if you guys have seen, there's a giant coronal hole that has been facing us for the last several days.
I mean, I saw it because you showed it this morning, Erin.
It is enormous. It's like half the size of the face of the sun. It is unbelievable how huge this is. And that is, you have to imagine that's the plasma all moving around and opening up and making space to release, right? And when you think about the Schumann and the energy that's being presented, the one argument people want to give me, well, it's just energy from the sun. Well, yes, that's true. And right? So this
Yeah.
is an inclusive universe, not an exclusive universe. Just because the energy is coming from the sun, where do you think that energy came from in the sun? It comes from source. Energy, all energy comes from source, regardless of the method in which it is delivered, right? This is just a way to measure that.
Oh.
So as we are coming to this point in our history of humanity where things are kind of coming to a boiling point, especially in the US, but globally, things are really rising to boiling points. People are starting to get disillusioned with their government, feeling not represented, unheard. There's the marginalization of smaller populations, the trans population, the LGBTQ population, DEI getting rolled back in the US. Are you fucking kidding me? Like what?
Yeah.
Like all this stuff happening, it's pushing us to a point. And there are things happening politically that people aren't hearing about that's slowly turning the tide of people standing up. For example, there was a seat just won in Pennsylvania that was a 15-point swing towards Trump during the election, and they just won that seat as Democrats less than 8 months past the election. That is enormous. So people are waking up and getting angry about not being represented. And this isn't necessarily Democratic or Republican. This is people in general feeling
Yeah.
like their voices are not being heard. Plus, we're starting to learn that we're far more capable of things than we have been taught. So the things like the telepathy tape podcast coming out and pointing out to people that these children that we have written off as whatever, no good, are actually far more connected and far more guided than we have ever been. And one of the most profound things I heard in those telepathy tapes was one of the kids said, "You don't get these powers if you lie." And I stopped in my tracks and I thought, oh my God, I see that. I see that divide. I see the people who have stepped into their honesty, embracing all of who they are and allowing themselves to admit when they're wrong, be open to new opinions, to seek new perspectives. These are the people that are moving in that direction. It's the people who continue to sit in the conflict. No, I'm right. You only see my way. There's no other way. Those are the people moving over on this side. And I think because there's TikTok, Facebook, social media, podcasts, we're getting a global audience. Now we're connecting greater than ever, and it's fueling that change that's really coming forward. And it is reflected in the Schumann in that we're at the maximum. So it's just fueling it with like gas on a fire.
So, for people to understand, then we have the electromagnetic field of the Earth. That's the Schumann resonance, but it's also being affected by the sun because everything's connected. And it's also been said that the resonance, there's like a heartbeat, like a frequency, right, of the Earth.
Yes.
Is it? Can you like expand on that, or is that changed, or like?
It is changing. So, in general, the Schumann resonance refers to a set of measurements that are tracking the spectrum peaks in the extremely low frequency portion of the Earth's electromagnetic field spectrum, the ELF, right? I love how creative they were with the names, just side effect, extremely low, ultra low. Okay. How much did you pay for that? Anyway, so this is the measurement. It was discovered in 1952 by Dr. Schumann. That's why it's called the Schumann resonance, but it's a collection of measurements. Lightning discharges within the cavity will also fuel this. CMEs, tectonic plate movements, all of these things will resonate. It's kind of like, imagine a cushion of air around the Earth. Energy gets in there and sort of ping pongs around, and that's what we're measuring. The base frequency of the Earth is 7.83 hertz, but it has subsequent harmonic frequencies at 14.3, 20.8, 27.3, and 33, right? Some great numbers in there. The 7.83 for, I don't know, 50 years of observing it has been pretty steady. It's no longer steady. It's jumping way up into the eights, like 8.01, 8.12. I've seen it as high as 8.23, which is huge compared to where it was. What that means is that the frequency, the contractions in the heart are getting closer and closer together. The heartbeat is speeding up and gaining power. So when you look at the graph, at the Tomsk graph, there are several that you're given. One looks like a actual heartbeat graph. If you can go back over the last, I'd say 2 years, you can clearly see them getting taller and closer together, more and more and more. And I've had a lot of people liken it to when someone's in labor and they have the thing on your belly and they're monitoring your contractions. That's very much what it looks like. These contractions are getting closer and closer and higher and stronger. And I again don't think that's any coincidence with everything that's going on right now. It just feels like Mother Earth is like ready to have this baby, like get it out. And, we're all here for the ride.
Yeah.
Like a brainchild that's being birthed at some point, right?
Exactly.
So with the spike, is it like how long are the spike intervals at that like 8 hertz frequency? Is it just
varies.
like a spike, or is it like?
No, it's never going to be when we are receiving this energy, it's not just a push because it kind of reverberates. So it tends to be prolonged. The longer it reverberates, the more it loses it's kind of like loses its power. It starts out really strong and then it kind of does like this and works its way out. Usually big white spikes like that I see on the graph last anywhere from 2 to 24 hours, depending on what type of energy it is. During those big white spikes is when the 7.83 will rise. If we get red spikes, a lot of times it will push it down a little bit because red is typically associated with lower release energies.
That root chakra.
That's right. She is.
And actually, because now that you mentioned like the chakras, Tamara, Erin, can you go into like, are the pulses or is the frequencies connected to the chakras in some way as well? Because I feel like in some of your videos you connect.
Yeah. So the way it was shown to me through observation and meditation is the energy comes in from the top and it starts at your crown, right?
Mhm.
Depending on how long the spike is how far down it goes in your system. It rarely is that we have big white energy that comes down to the root. And I think that's because most of us are trying to release in our root. We have a lot of teachings, beliefs, and understandings that the new energy isn't as important in the root as the release energy. You will see on the graph there will be these blips of red dots that come up, and a lot of times those are associated way down towards the bottom of the graph where your sacral chakra and your root would be, also your earthly energies. Bottom three chakras associated with your physical manifestation, top three chakras associated with your etheric manifestation, and the heart is the center where they come together and you lead a heart-centered life. So just depending on where it is on the graph. It changes though, to be honest. Some days I'll go into meditation and I think I know exactly what I'm going to get told, and I get told something different, and I'm standing there in front of the camera going, well, this is awkward, you know?
That's awesome. So I'm also curious. Okay. So we come from the standpoint everything's connected, right? So we've got Earth and sun and galaxy, consciousness, oneness consciousness. And if we're looking at how the work we do, the law of attraction, manifestation is connected with, say, Schumann, changes in frequencies, like, is there a bridge that you would easily be able to identify? Like the way we would say it is, your inner world affects what you manifest on your outer world,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. I mean, that's 100% true.
So how does the
So
Schumann kind of relate to that?
what I have noticed the pattern of is big white energy, because of the frequency that it brings with it. It tends to raise your base frequency as you are integrating this, right? You have to remember it's not going to come down and meet you. So you have to rise in order to integrate this frequency. And when you are rising to meet that frequency, it opens you up to greater potential, because you're going from sitting in your normal slot, say, and you're expanding this way. Now you have more room in here and you can pull down some more of the possibility that's sort of floating in the etheric around you.
Yeah.
It opens you up to being more perceptive of ideas, more open to inspiration, which is all part of how Source is going to reach out to you to get you to pay attention to that little bit of possibility.
And so in our teachings, we would also say, like, love is the highest frequency, gratitude is the highest frequency, authenticity is the highest frequency. And so do we feel, or do you sense like we're all also, as the collective, raising the frequency, clearing out things from the collective that aren't necessary? Like, do you feel like
Yes.
we're doing that kind of on a greater scale?
Yes, absolutely. We are all on our own individual timelines, but we are all part of a collective. That's why we're here, not just for ourselves, but to help raise awareness while we're here. When you are taking care of yourself and your base frequency rises, it cannot help but resonate into the collective. And it's like a chorus, right? One person starts singing, another person starts singing, they start to harmonize. Then another person comes in and they start to harmonize. That's just how it tends to work. And because there are so many people in the state of awakening and working on their own frequencies, just by default, the collective frequency has to rise. That's only logical to me. Like, it doesn't make any sense otherwise. However, there is a very defined collective of people who are choosing not to awaken at this time for whatever reason, regardless of what the reason. They're choosing not to see perspective, outside inspiration, whatever it is, and they're stuck there. When this energy is offered, it typically is not absorbed into their space because they are not willing to rise to accept it, right? So a lot of people will ask me, well, do the unawakened collective notice when we get these spikes? They do, but they don't usually know what it is. They'll feel frustrated because suddenly contrast is shown to them. You have this opportunity, but you're stuck down here. So the frustration is there because they don't understand they can actually reach that. Frustration, anxiety, these sorts of things is typically what gets triggered in the non-awakened collective because they are unwilling to rise to that frequency and accept the energy. So for me, it's been shown that we're very clearly on two different collective timelines now. And depending on where your focus is which one you feed, They're going to continue to grow either side. It's just, where do you want to see yourself?
I'm curious too because you have a very scientific background. I think you mentioned you even have a PhD. And so, with that scientific background and studying Schumann resonance, and I'm curious how you how you began your spiritual journey, like how you
Yeah.
began inside of law of attraction manifestation and then merging the two.
Oh, fantastic. So I don't have a PhD. I was working on it. I was in the track, but I decided I'm going to do this instead. So I have a undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's degree in health professions education. My job was designing high-tech simulations for new doctors. So think of it like this. I had a mannequin who could vaginally deliver another mannequin, come out shoulder first, head first, feet first, crying, not crying, blue, breathing, cord around the neck. I mean, this is high tech stuff I worked with. So that's the environment I was in. Prior to that, I was a nurse for 25 years, which is all about rules, regulations, all those sorts of things, right? For me, when I went through my awakening, it was a complete 180 for me. It was so hard for my brain to function in this thought process. And I spent a lot of time checking out different spiritual teachers, looking for someone to explain it to me in a voice I could understand. I have a very logical minded voice. You cannot talk to me in artsy fartsy terms and
Hmm.
expect me to understand you. And I tell people
And
all the time, oh,
I'm
sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
was there something that like sparked your spiritual awakening that like
Yes.
sparked that for you?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with a disease called APS, antiphospholipid syndrome. It means that the covering on your red blood cells gets stripped away, and so your blood becomes sticky and you clot a lot.
Mm.
The reason I had this diagnosis is I believe it was 2017. I had several blood clots in my body that were unexplainable, and so this was the conclusion that I had this disease. This disease can be fatal and you have to change a lot of aspects of your life. I had to take blood thinners every day. I had huge bruises all over my body from these. My hair was falling out, but it never sat right with me. It never, because yes, some of it fit, but as a nurse, I'm looking at this with a critical eye and thinking something doesn't fit. But again, my training in the medical field, my doctor, who was his specialist, says, nope, I know the answer. You listen to me. I know the answer. Okay, fine. So I took this medication and all this stuff. COVID hits. I'm terrified because as someone who has a disease that causes blood clotting, COVID was causing clotting. My doctor literally called me on the phone and told me, do not get exposed to COVID. It will kill you. My anxiety was so high that I
Jesus.
couldn't function, right?
Hmm.
Home from school, school meaning work, and can't teach medicine over Zoom. We're all trying to scramble around and figure that out. And I'm sitting here one day and I started thinking to myself, I have access to one of the greatest medical libraries in the country, and I have never once researched my own disease. That's dumb. I got nothing else to do. So I go into the library and I started researching this. And as a nurse, I'm looking at the criteria and I'm thinking, I don't remember having some of these tests done. Something's not right. Something's not right. And again, brought it up to my specialist who told me again, nope, you just do what I tell. Okay, fine. So then I discovered
Something
that
smells fishy around here.
exactly. Well, here's the thing to remember. APS is extremely rare. So a
Oh,
specialist for APS is just an oncologist. It's not
oh.
someone who specializes in APS. It's so rare they don't have, for me to find a particular APS doctor, I have to go to like the Mayo Clinic or something. So I discovered that the doctor who discovered this disease, Dr. Hughes, was still alive and still teaching medicine in England. And I was sitting here and I thought, I bet he's got nothing to do either. I'm going to email him. So I emailed him, and I know as a nurse, he's never going to diagnose me, right? But I said, this is my situation. These are my symptoms. If I was your daughter, would you be comfortable with my diagnosis, or would you suggest I get an alternate diagnosis? And he emailed me back and he said, get another diagnosis.
Hmm.
So I went to my primary care doctor, all my records in my hand, walked in like this, you know, and sat down with my primary. And he sat there with me for 45 minutes going through my records. And he said, I don't see this test. I'm sure you're fine. Let's do the test. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Fine. Did the test. He called me the next day and I could hear it in his voice. He said, you not only do not have this disease, you've been taking a medication every day for 2 years that we have no idea how it is going to affect your organs down the line because it was treating something that wasn't there. You need to stop immediately and come into my office. And in
Shit.
that
My God.
moment, Right. And in that moment, as someone who had put all of my faith, all of
Mhm.
my identity into medicine, for it to feel like it completely betrayed me, ripped all of my identity away from me. I literally was sitting there and could not function. I couldn't think. I kept going through everything in my head. How could this happen? I'm trained in this. Oh my God. Like all this stuff going through my head, blaming myself over and over. And I kind of went into this, my husband calls it my mental collapse, for like a week where I just couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't do anything. And my daughter one day, who at the time I think she was 17, she came in and she said, "Mom, have you ever meditated?" And I was like, "No, get out of my room." And she's like, "Maybe you should try it, you know?" So I did. And I went
Kids
into,
can be such jerks sometimes.
they
Let mama
can,
have a mental breakdown. Jeez.
right? But with someone with a busy mind, the idea of meditation to me was torture. I can't sit alone in a dark room. So I literally went into, I have a big closet, went in my closet, shut the door, shut off the lights, put on a mask, shut the bathroom door, did everything. And I sat down and I had this explosion of sensory input that I
Mm.
cannot explain to anybody no matter how hard I try. I was
Mm.
seeing things physically with my eyeballs that I felt like I could reach out and touch them. My whole body was shaking. I had heat running up and down my body, all kinds of stuff. And when I came out of that, it was a really interesting feeling because how do you deny something that you have physically experienced yourself? I can't tell myself it didn't happen because I just experienced it, but I didn't have the words to understand what it was. And so I kind of got trapped in this feedback loop of looking at 100 different teachers to try to understand. And that's where it came in, where I figured out I can't understand a lot of these people. They're not speaking my language, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, and kudos to you for I've known I myself have experienced too. Sometimes when you get that intense of a download, that intense of an experience, that intense of like sensation, overload, like whatever, as you're listening, listeners, as whatever you want to call it, it can be somewhat so disruptive that you turn it off and go the opposite way.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I believe that happened to me when I was younger. Like it's memories
Mm-hmm.
that start to resurface after I get back into this. I'll
Yeah.
start thinking, I'm like, oh, I remember when one time I went and did blah, blah, blah. I remember that. Like it's totally gone from my head. Almost
Yeah.
like I was on a different timeline for a hot second and
Yeah.
then shifted back over here. And now I'm remembering stuff that I, like weird stuff, memories from when I was a young teenager of going to a seance. I'm like, I forgot all about that, you know, like all these interesting things that it's like I had the opportunity to awaken so many times before and I just passed right past it.
If I
Like it
had
was
another
always part of your path, like pulling you, and
Yes.
that this was the time you were like, okay, I'm gonna follow it. I'm gonna answer it now.
Well, I kind of felt like it was my guides were like, no, you don't get a choice anymore.
yeah.
This
Hmm.
is the time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify for listeners because I've heard a lot of people and we've had people inquire with us. They inquire about a spiritual awakening. I know it's kind of a buzzword, and
Hmm.
I do want to just throw into the mix like not everybody's spiritual quote unquote spiritual awakening is that intense or
No.
will be that intense. And
Yeah.
I have a firm belief that if you can hold that and receive it and you need that wake up call, it will be that intense. But for some people who can't hold that, wouldn't know what to do with it, their system would go into shutdown, it won't look like that. So
Yes.
I'm a firm believer like the body and the being will introduce what is appropriate for the body and the being. And as so if you're listening, like a spiritual awakening doesn't have to look like that and maybe is not appropriate for you. And so
Right.
like to compare ourselves, I think is where a lot of us go. And
Yeah.
I want our listeners to be kind to themselves. You
Yes,
know?
comparison is the sneak thief of joy. It sneaks in the
Yeah.
back door and steals all your flowers.
Yeah.
In my own experience, I 100% agree with you. And I find that when you are very entrenched in a belief, like I was about medicine and science,
Mm-hmm.
that the consideration of an alternate possibility is so disruptive that it can cause a big feeling in the awakening.
Yeah.
However, if
Yeah.
you've grown up differently, where you grew up with a family who was more open to these things, it may not be such a paradigm shift for you. But
Yeah.
because I was so planted in the cement of medicine, there was no other choice. And I think it's also really important for people to remember that spiritual awakening is kind of a misnomer. You don't have one awakening and then it's over. It is a constant thing. But what
Mhm.
I think people get in their head is the first experience you have usually has a big impact and makes a big impression. But as you progress through your awakening experience, it's almost, I don't know that jaded is the right word, but it's harder to surprise you because
Yeah.
now you are aware of so much of these things. So things that may have been big, huge, giant deals at the beginning of your awakening don't seem that big anymore. And I
Yeah.
think people get disheartened with that, but that's not at all. It's a sign of growth. It's a sign of recognizing there's so much more here. So I don't want anyone to get discouraged. If I have a lot of clients who tell me I feel like nothing's happening, but
Yeah.
then when I talk to them, they're like, well, I did this and this and this, and I go, well, what do you mean nothing's happening?
Yeah.
You're just expecting it to be some mind blowing event. But the more you are aware that it's there, the less mind blowing it is. It's just
Right.
life,
It becomes more of like the day to day, the way
Yes.
of life. And I think what's interesting, bringing this back to the Schumann resonance or our frequency, as we've increased our capacity to hold that higher frequency, we will have the veil between the two worlds thins.
Yes.
That frequency becomes a new way of being.
Yes.
It's like it becomes more like air. And then what we do, like telepathy, reading other people's minds, like tuning in intuitively, and like like I was sleeping the other day and I had my knee like on top of a pillow on my side. And I swear somebody came over and just hit me on the knee. And I just like, and these are sometimes people are yelling at me in my dream, like not dreaming in my house, yelling at me, and it's such the way of life. I don't even talk about it. I'm just
Right.
like, it's just not the time.
Right. Well,
I
here's the
want to go
thing.
back to sleep. That was like,
Exactly. Well, and here's the way to think about it too in regard to your frequency. As your frequency is growing, it's hard to sustain a high frequency because your base frequency isn't up there yet. We go up
mhm,
and down all day long.
mhm,
But it's kind of like when you're on a road trip and you're driving through different towns and you pick up different radio stations as you go through. As your
mhm,
frequency goes up and down like this, it goes in and out like this too. So you're bumping up against these different things that are available kind of in the ether or whatever you want to call it. You're just hitting those different edges of perception because your frequency is constantly doing this. As you start to hold, like if you start here, as you expand, you hit those edges. Eventually, you're going to stay here. And then you
yeah,
start expanding here and you hit those edges. And then you
yeah,
expand, and it's a slow process. People expect it to be right now. If it was right now, your energy would shut down, it would overflow. You are an electrical human body. If all that energy dropped into your system, it would short circuit, just plain and simple. So people have to be careful with that. Don't try to force it.
Hmm. The other thing I would say is like you are attracting what you're a match for. So
Yes,
if you are not a match for those higher levels of frequency, like you're just not there yet. You're not a match for it yet. You have to up
right.
level and set your foundation before you can actually see and experience those things. Would you say that's
Yes,
accurate?
absolutely. And the way you experience the energy, the way you perceive it, it changes based on where you are in your journey. So if we get a blast of energy to the throat chakra, for example, it's going to affect me differently than it does you and you because I'm in a different place than you are. And it doesn't mean that any of us are ahead or behind the other. It's just different. It's like you have red hair, you have brown
mhm.
hair, I have gray hair. That's just how it is, you know? And
I
people get
might
very
have gray, but don't tell anyone.
I promise I won't.
Just my hair, just the lady who cuts my hair. She's the only person that knows.
I just got my hair cut yesterday. She did a wash and all my gray came back out again because I have hard water. So it dulls it down.
Sorry, I was like,
No,
let's be
it's
real,
good. It's
real quick. All
good.
right.
One of the biggest blocks I see in my
Mhm.
clients is they come to me and they want to understand why isn't my experience like so and
Right,
so's.
right.
but you are a unique frequency. There is
Right.
no other frequency like you. So anything that is compatible with your energy has to fit into your frequency like a key. So it's not going to be the same for me. Everybody's, I more than anything, I want people to just remember it's okay. It's okay.
Well, and it is like, and I want to ask a very specific question because I have this theory, but before I ask that, I do just want to say, because there would be times where, you're so great because you're like, I was taken out, I can't see straight, I don't know what the hell that was, and I was like, I didn't feel shit, but like on other days, you're feeling great and you're like, this is great. And I'm like, I can't move my arms, and so there is no rhyme and I love that you also say that on your reports, right? You're like,
Yeah.
this is going to affect everybody differently. Okay. So I had started doing nervous system work with my clients about 3 years ago because what I noticed was our clients, they want to make changes, they want to access higher frequencies, they want higher consciousness, and then they're in this constant state of fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? And they're just like reacting, right? So we started in the nervous system. It includes meditation, but it's like a whole comprehensive look at like, calm the fuck down. Like,
Right.
for real, right?
Yeah.
And when this was getting introduced and we kind of started playing with it, and I think it was probably 3 to 5 years. I don't know. It's been a while now, but I had this inclining, this notion, that might not be a word. I had an insight though. And the insight was, so many people nowadays are ADD, ADHD, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, I'm not one for labels. So if the second we label something, we don't ask enough questions. Similar to your experience in the healthcare, I healed my thyroid. I've had clients who have lots of seizures, and the seizures, when we start to unpack it, is actually they're getting downloads and they're highly psychic.
Yes.
And so taking them from seizures to they're just highly psychic, and then teaching them how to work with the energy allowed them to heal seizures, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
so taking off the label is like first and foremost what I do when I'm looking at something. And so if I take off ADHD and I take off ADD, because it's just such a buzzword, right? But I look at the fact that we are privy to so much information that, like, back when I was a kid and you went outside and the phone was on the wall and you drank from the hose and your parents were like, don't come back and go entertain yourself.
Right.
We
Exactly.
had no stimuli from electronics, texting, social media, emails, nothing. Now we're inundated in a whole new way.
Yes.
And on top of that, I'm also recognizing like we're more sensitive because of the consciousness raising. Like I'm sensitive to sound, and I'm sensitive to light, and I'm sensitive like what does my sheets feel like, and what is my smell, and what is, like I'm super overly sensitive. Now we could put all those labels on it. But I feel like we're not trained to have so much stimuli and be so sensitive at the same time.
Yes.
And then we have this thing and it's just like labeled as ADHD or ADD and everybody needs to be on fucking medication.
Right. Yes. So I agree. But I want to add to that.
Please add to it. I'm like, I've been playing with this theory and I'm like,
I agree.
People, just calm your nervous system down. Take some baths, turn off your shit, like have some candles.
I 100% agree. We are so far overstimulated, it's ridiculous, right? From my perspective, I genuinely believe that ADHD and neurospicy behaviors are a factor of evolution. Because we have so much stimulus coming in, our brain is evolving to create different ways to work with this. This is where this comes from personal experience. I have diagnosed ADHD, was not diagnosed till college, right? That was painful in high school. But anyway, get to college, I get diagnosed, and I get put on medication. Now, I noticed when I'm on medication, I am laser focused on one thing. I can only work on one thing, and I did not like that feeling. So I went on and off of medications for years. Finally, I go to a brand new psychologist who sits down with me. And the first thing she asked me is, do you want to be on medication? And I said, no. And she said, why are you on medication? I said, well, so I can focus. And she said, well, when you are not on medication, are you unfocused? And I said, well, yeah, I'm doing 100 different things. She said, that's not what I asked you. Are you unfocused on the things you're doing? And I said, no, I'm pretty focused on what I'm doing. She said, right. Your brain's not broken. You need a new system.
Yeah.
So she told me, she said, get 3 computer monitors and put them on your desk and a different project on each one of those monitors. And when you're bored with this one, you work on this one. When you're bored with this one, you work on this one. And I set up my office like that. And that simple move gave me a personal freedom to let my brain do what it needed to do. And it made me the single most productive person in my entire department within a month. And I wrote an entire book on it's a how-to guide for other universities just developing their simulation departments, which is relatively new in healthcare. I literally sat down and wrote a huge workbook with how do you start at the beginning, how do you build your department, how do you get your simulations. I wrote all of that by myself just because I gave myself the freedom to stop thinking I have to perform the same way everybody else does.
And that's 100%, that's it. So I had when I was pregnant, I had a channel I went to go see on a weekly basis. It was a nice little reset. And the information that I got about my daughter, I mean, loquacious, yes, that she taught so many words. And like the way that she can, it was like, you'll think that you'll think she can't multitask.
Right.
And I test her nonstop because I'm talking and reading and she's doing 3 other things.
Yes.
And I'm like, I can stop reading. She's like, no. And she'll read back what I'm.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I just want to make sure I'm not wasting my time.
Right.
You know,
well,
like,
let's take this another step further, right? So let's go back full circle to this idea of like stacked knowledge, right? So from my perspective, my working theory is that these neurospicy behaviors that we're picking up on autism.
By the way, what is neurospicy? I've heard this. What does that mean?
So
I feel like
neurospicy.
it's a dirty book.
It might be a good dirty book. So neurospicy is what you would call a behavior that is not anything neurotypical. So neurotypical is what society says this is normal, right? Neurospicy are ADHDers, autism spectrum, anyone who thinks outside of conventional processes.
It's like fancy for neurodivergent.
It's fancy for neurodivergent. It's just nicer than
okay, so all listeners, it doesn't mean dirty book talk.
It doesn't mean dirty brains. No.
Different TikTok. Different.
I really freaking thought it was that. I was like,
No.
what are you talking about? It's so weird.
No.
Like, let's go there.
But I think these things, they're not new, but they are increasing in intensity. So you can argue two sides. Is our detection of them increasing? Yes, absolutely. But we're also paying attention to it more.
Yeah.
But from my perspective as a healthcare worker, I'm looking at several successive generations and how their sensories have changed in the last several years. So for example, with me, born in the 70s, right? I got no problem with loud music, loud noise, loud. I allowed everything, right? My son, the next generation down, he's not a millennial. He's whatever comes after millennial. Z, he's a
Gen
Zoomer,
Z.
right? He's a Z. So he has autism. So he comes into this world. He cannot tolerate bright flashing lights, bright noise, all these things. He has a lot of texture issues. But when he's in an environment that keeps him comfortable, he's absolutely incredibly brilliant and incredibly productive. He's going to school for aerospace engineering. This kid is on the track. But he has to have the quiet, right? Then I have a niece who's only 7, so she's Generation Alpha, right? She comes forward with even more sensitivities, but she's not technically autistic or any of these things. She just doesn't like it. And I think what's happening is the shift in generations, because we've gotten so loud and so distracted that the new generation comes forward to remind us to quiet down, to turn within. And because they come in the form of children that we love, the parents are saying, okay, let's turn down the volume, let's turn down the signs. And so the world is getting a little bit quieter, and they are speaking up and saying, hey, I remember this when I was, my 7-year-old niece remembers shit from before she was here. and will tell me all the time.
Nice.
Because she still has that connection.
Yeah.
And it's this building of things as we move along. I think it's very purposeful that so many of our children are oversensitive to make the world quiet down. I think that's really important. And when you talk about the idea, before you start, I want to finish my thought because I'm on a track. The thing I was talking about before about the building of knowledge, how it feels like your kids are so much more smarter than you are, so much smarter.
It's a word. I'm going.
It's a word.
Yep.
It's called the Flynn effect, Flynn, the Flynn effect. And this is the substantial and long sustained increase in both fluid and crystallized intelligence test scores. So this has been measured over time in generations. So Generation X, my generation, we took a test score at 9th grade and we have a level, right? The next generation takes the exact same test at the exact same time and they score up here. The next one scores up here because we are compounding knowledge. You store knowledge in your system, in your DNA, and by interacting with things that stimulate that knowledge, you bring it all forward. So that's why your kids seem so much smarter than you are. My son's doing math in high school that I didn't even do in my graduate degree. So there's stuff going on here. And I think it works spiritually and physically with both physical and spiritual knowledge, both compounding like this.
100%.
That was the question I was going to ask, was like to go back to what you were saying earlier. So thank you for like explaining that. And now that you say that, like it's both from a like knowledge-based scientific perspective as well as like a spiritual perspective. One thing I've heard, I think actually Tamara, you may have said this, is like when kids come in, like let's say a mom that gives birth to a daughter, like that daughter cannot be at a lower frequency. Like every time you bring in a new soul, they're at a same frequency or higher as the parent. And I'm curious like, what your thoughts are on that.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. However, I agree that when the child reaches a certain age, their free will kicks in and then they're in charge of their own frequency. Right? The bringing forward of a new
Are you
soul.
saying it could go like this?
It can. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I mean, you have these children with the best of intentions. Most of us have these children with the best of intentions, the most love possible. They're born out of an act of love most parts of time, right?
Yeah.
At love being the strongest energy in the universe. I don't know if you've ever seen the video of when an egg meets a sperm. Have you actually seen it under a microscope? It produces light.
No, I want to see that now. Could we get
You can look it up. Look it up on Google. It's all over the place. It's actual footage from a microscope of when the sperm meets the egg. There is light that happens. Wow. That is the love that you have put in there, condensed into cell format. And because it's so large, it cannot stay that small. It must start to expand. And so you have started to build the frequency based on love. Right? So as the child is born, you bring them forth in love. You do your best as a parent. I believe we all do our best. 95% of us do the best we can. And then you give the child all the tools you can so that when they become in charge of their frequency, they continue to make choices so that they can continue to move forward. That is the job as the parent, right? The job of the child is to come forward and remind the parent of the fun side, the joy, the curiosity, the big-eyed wonder of things. So there's supposed to be a copacetic relationship where one feeds the other. I think for a long time it got very lopsided and it was only, oh, you do what I say. And now, I mean, not to brag, but me and my children, I listen to my kids a lot more than my parents ever listened to me. I will ask my kids opinions. What do you think? How do you feel? What do you know? I have a child who, you know, with autism, he's so beautiful and unique. He's really interesting to try to communicate with, but I'm putting a lot of stock in how he feels, and he tells me that he doesn't get that, like from his teachers and stuff like that. So I'm trying to raise him to be more aware, and that's a choice we as a generation are making with open eyes, like consciously choosing.
Love
Does that make sense? I hope that made sense.
100%. No, it takes me back to thinking of, you know, even, I mean, I try not to tell my kid how smart she is because she's like real smart and then she gets like real you know, because she's real
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
But it's the same. I mean, I lean on her and I'm like, well, you know the answer. Like, don't ask me. You can figure that
Right.
out. You know the answer. You tell me, what is that? You know, and I think that's a change in the generation
It is.
from I don't know if we're in the same ballpark,
I
but
was,
my parents
yeah.
were the boomer generation. So
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
know, you're like,
Well, and their generation before them was even worse as far
yeah,
as free thinking. I mean, women couldn't vote. I mean, there was a lot of things going on back
yeah,
then.
yeah.
And we are rapidly progressing towards a more open society, but it has taken a lot of conflict to bring that forward. But, you know, I'm a big fan of what Esther Hicks says. If you don't know what you don't want, you're never going to know what you do want. So you
100%.
have to
Yeah.
experience the conflict so you can say, I don't like that. I'm going to go over here. You know,
Yeah.
if you don't know, you don't know.
Goodness, we have unpacked all of the different layers of frequency and Schumann and kids and consciousness and health and healing and
Well, the only other thing I would want to add is I would
yes.
love to talk about manifestation in terms of frequency because that's one of
Yes.
the most common questions I get. People will come to me and they will say, "Am I 5D? Am I 5D?" And I'm like, "What does that mean to you exactly?" um, we
Tell me
are
more.
all we are all at once, right? So you have to think of it like 3D is the physical reality that you live in. It
Hmm.
has height, width, and length. You can physically touch these things, right? That is
Hmm.
a lower density because the atoms have to slow down so that they can form a solid, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So then you have 4D. 4D is the realm of time. Time is outside physicality, but it's where your mind is located. Okay. Your mind is in 4D. It can go forward in time and backward in time. It can stay present. It can do all kinds of things. 5D is outside of time. This is all of possibility. And if you think of yourself like a Wi Fi tower walking around, you're putting off all these signals and all these possibilities are around you. What happens is you're walking around in this ether all day long, and for some reason, some particle comes by and it gets your attention. Ooh, that's a neat idea. So then you focus on that possibility. By default, it draws more to itself and collapses itself into a wave and it becomes a probability. Then you pull it down from 5D into 4D in your mind, where you think about it, you talk about it, you plan it, you look in the future, you think how it's going to work out, you look in the past, you think how it didn't work before, and then you bring it down into 3D where you take action. You actually buy the material, you set up the space, you talk about it, and you bring it literally into the 3D where you can physically hold it. The problem is the material, the atoms go so slow in 3D that the idea in 5D has to go through many compressions to get here. So you have to let go of your idea of what it has to look like and leave it open to what it can look like. You might ask for a new house thinking that's going to give you a sense of freedom, but you get a car instead. Well, it's still giving you a sense of freedom. Maybe the car was easier to reach you than the house was. So you
Hmm.
have to be open to the feeling you want, not the object you think is going to give it to you, because it might not be able to squeeze through all those layers to get to you. Just focus on the feeling you want to have.
So, how important is it that people understand that whole process versus, say, focusing on an outcome, a feeling, something?
Well, I think for me, it was more helpful because it's logical. I can see
Mhm.
how it progresses. And for
Yeah,
me, just having someone tell me to just focus on the positive feels very false. If
yeah.
I am not feeling positive and you tell me just to be positive, I don't feel like that's helping me, right? But
You're
Ronnie,
just
does that
gonna give
ever
them the
help?
finger and like go.
exactly, give me
Be
something
positive.
actionable.
Go shove it. Right.
Right, exactly. But as an adult learner, so one of my degrees is in education. As an adult
Hmm.
learner, if you can understand why you are doing something, you will invest into the learning process much
Hmm.
more readily. That's why I think it's important to understand the process of manifestation and not just that it's some nebulous thing. It's
Yeah.
literally science.
Yeah.
It's science. It can be
Mhm.
explained in frequency, movement of atoms, and attention and focus, all kinds of stuff, but you have to be willing to do that. And sometimes having that understanding of the logic behind it
Hmm.
can make it easier to do the thing that feels nebulous or like it's in a cloud.
So, if somebody was to say, I just feel really stuck, I did that, it's not working, what would your advice be, or how would you
I
guide
would
them?
I
Or
would tell them to get completely off whatever it is. If the person is telling me I hate my job, I can't get out of my job, I feel stuck, I looked for a new job, some of the things I would point out is number one, when you were looking for that new job, what was your frame of mind when you were doing it? Were you doing it because you don't like your job and you were thinking of all the things you hate about your job? Well, I hate to break it to
Mm-hmm.
you, but law attraction is neutral. It
Yeah.
doesn't care if you say you want it or don't want it. If that's where your focus is, that's what you're going to get reflections of. And
Yeah.
if it's too hard for you to find something about your job you like, get off the job. Go do something else. Go for a walk, eat dinner, talk to a friend. Get off of it and let the momentum decrease so that when you go back to it, you come with a clear vibrational sense. Momentum is like a river, it will wash you away. And if you start out by focusing on something that feels difficult, it will compound itself. And it's not easy, sustainable, or logical to me to tell someone who feels that stuck to just get over it.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And it was so frustrating when I'd have people just say positive things. I mean, I can sit here all day and go, everything's fine. But if I feel like it's all in the toilet, it doesn't matter the words that are coming out of my mouth. What matters is the vibration that's coming off of me. Law of attraction literally doesn't care if you want it or not. If your attention's on it, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
You know?
100%.
Totally.
You know, I tell people it's like, if you start your day off, you stub your toe and you go, oh, great, I'm going to have a terrible day. Okay, great. So now you're going to lose your keys. You're going to get a speeding ticket. You're going to be late to work. And then you'll say, see, I told you I knew I was going to have a bad day. You brought that to you.
Yeah.
But it's on the other side. If you've ever purchased a new car and you're driving home, you see 20 different versions of that car out of nowhere. And it's because you're sitting in a feeling of joy. So law of attraction is reflecting it to you in every way possible.
Yeah. And when I do that sometimes with my kid, like she'll wake up on the wrong side of a bed. And it's like, we're not going to school like this. This is going to be an epic fail. So we're going to shift all this before school happens. So yeah, 100%.
When I don't know how old your daughter is, but my niece is 7, and every morning she listens to the Snoop Dogg affirmations tape.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I listen to it
around. Oh my God, he's amazing. And she totally jams with it. And it gets her whole morning started. I see her in her bathroom brushing her teeth. Like,
aw, how cute.
You know? Isn't it so weird that this generation will never know that Snoop Dogg used to be like a gangster?
Oh no. I mean, it's crazy to me. Some of the stuff, I'm like, he's friends with Martha Stewart. Like, what is happening in this world right now?
He wrote a children's book. You're like, wait, what? Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
Mine's 9. She wakes up and she puts Alexa, I can't say it out loud, Alexa, on volume 10, and she's like, fist bumping dance party. And we actually go to sleep reading one of my favorite book series, which is Sarah. It was written by Esther Hicks. It's a 3-part series. We love it so much we just keep reading it over and over.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll have to get that. I haven't read that. I'll have to get that.
Real. I love it, and I'm old. So it's good for all ages.
Yeah. And if someone is looking for like a narrative description of what it's like in the astral realms, Jane Roberts wrote a book years ago called The Education of Oversoul 7.
Okay.
And it takes a narrative approach to the idea of spirituality. So it's like reading a novel, but with all the concepts of spirituality. And sometimes that can be easier for people to digest because it's not so like you have to believe this.
Yeah.
But it's all the principles that she taught just in narrative form. It's very good.
We'll add them in the show notes. We'll find it. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. Hey, Erin, as you are supporting people on their spiritual journey with all of the gifts that you have, what is the best way to get in contact? We'll put all your links in the show description, of course, but what is the best way to get in contact with you, to work with you? What is the best way?
So there's a couple different options. I'm in the middle of curating a conscious community on Patreon. In that community, there are tiers of membership from free all the way up to $60 a month. But this is an easy place to get started where you can meet people of the same like-mindedness. I post a lot of scientifically based articles there that connect science and spirituality, and it's offering of classes and stuff like that. If someone wants to work one-on-one with me, I have a website, consciouslyerin.com. They can go there and they can book their session. My private sessions are very different than a typical oracle card reading. I work through inspired conversation. So I'm going to sit down with you and I'm going to start asking you questions. And through those questions, it tends to lead exactly where it needs to go. Most people tell me they wish they had more time, but the more questions you can bring, the more effective the session tends to be. So those are the main two ways. I have TikTok, YouTube, Instagram for my morning videos, but for more in-depth stuff, either Patreon or my website is probably the best.
Awesome. And
what's your favorite project you're working on right now for people?
My classes.
Your class.
My Professor Brown class is my favorite. I wrote a 565-page reference book about spirituality, covering as many different topics as I could. I think there's 45 different topics. And the Professor Brown class is taking 2 topics at a time and talking about them, talking through them. I cover everything from what is a spiritual awakening all the way through quantum entanglement and AI and spirituality. So it's a huge range, with the intention of the more perspectives we have, the more people we have thinking about this, the more we can expand our knowledge. So this isn't intended to be a class where you sit and go through a lecture. This is a class where you read the material, you come to the class, and we're going to all talk about it together. And then I have things I give people that are in additional readings, like YouTube videos or articles that support what we talked about. And then I also put up a discussion board question just to keep the juices flowing, keep you thinking about these things as you move forward. So that's my favorite.
Nice.
That's awesome. That sounds like such a fun way to like be together in community and like learn together, and like your specialty of combining the science with the spirituality and like really growing in that.
Yeah, what's really interesting is I've had 3 past life regressions where I was hypnotized and put under. And in the first regression, one of the questions I asked my higher self is, what is my job? What am I here to do? And I walked into this session confident that I was going to be told, I am a healer. I'm going to heal the world. I'm a healer, right? I go into this session and I don't know if you've ever been in this state of hypnosis. It's an odd state because I wasn't out. I was aware. I could hear her ask me questions, but my brain wasn't moving fast enough for me to respond. It's like, I can't say it. And then I would just start talking. And it was very odd because I was observing myself speak. And I'd think to myself, who the hell is that? So she asked the question, what is your job here? And I heard myself say, she's a teacher. And I immediately, my brain was like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. That's not right. We're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. And I pushed against it so hard for so long. And then here I am. The thing that gives me the greatest sense of joy is the aspect of teaching. Because for me, there's no greater feeling in this entire world than when I sit across from a student. I did this at the university all the time, and they're working through a problem. And I'm not giving them the answer, but I'm kind of leading them. And they get that answer, and that feeling of empowerment that rushes through them, and the look on their face is, oh my God, I get it. That, like, I just got full body chills. That is my favorite thing in the whole world. And so the more people I can help have those experiences, the better it helps me feel. So that's what I'm excited about.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, thank you for surrendering to your path and surrendering to being a teacher and all of the gifts that you provide the world, from like the Schumann resonance to your medical knowledge to like combining that with all of the law of attraction and manifestation that you give. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I feel very, very fortunate to be where I am, and I never take it for granted. I'm so excited about everything we have coming. With the speed at which the collective is awakening, the converging of all these astrological things and all the stuff we're discovering, we are literally standing at the precipice of a new time in history. There will be people who look back 1,000 years from now and talk about how we as humanity woke up, made choices, and changed things for the better. And I have no doubt that we're standing right on the edge of that. And I'm super excited to be here.
So before we close out, I have one question, which is, if you could just leave our listeners with one sentence, one piece of advice as we go through this, what would you want them to know? What is that legacy piece of advice?
Don't discount your imagination. Source is going to reach out to you through the thing you have the least resistance to. And most of the time, it's your imagination. All of this comes from somewhere. So the idea that science fiction is science fiction, be very careful with that, because it's only science fiction until it's not, right?
Oh my gosh. Erin, anything else you'd like to share as we close out the episode for today?
No, just be gentle with yourself. You're changing your life. It's not going to happen overnight. If you're 45 years old, you spent 44 years the way you are, you can't change in 3 days. So be careful,
you.
unwind, you know?
Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for your kindness. Thank you for being on with us. Thank you for sharing all of the life path knowledge that you've received up until this point. We appreciate you so much, Erin. Thank you for the work you do.
Yeah, well, it was a great to be here. It was a wonderful conversation. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Very welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. We're going to close out the episode for today. If you guys would like to connect with Erin, we have all of her links in the show description below. You can connect with her community, you can schedule a private session, and you can follow her on all the socials. Thank you for joining us here on Lighten Up. We are incredibly grateful for the time you've spent with us looking at life in a completely new way. Everything we experience is the law of attraction in motion. So each time you tune in and experience a new breakthrough, you are showing up for yourself, shifting your perspective, and changing your point of attraction. This in itself is a radical act of self-love. To show up for yourself, leave behind old patterns, and commit to a completely new reality. This is how we create global change. Thank you for being part of the Ripple. If today's conversation resonated with you and you want to dive deeper in the methodology, join our Living Beyond Limitations free training series or explore our 20-day free meditation series. Links are in the description. And if you're ready to work with Tamara and I on a more personal level in our flagship program, email me. Remember, we're here every Tuesday with new episodes, so like, subscribe, and keep following for more. Until next time, keep expanding, choosing you, and living beyond your limitations.